read like a statement from Denver Defense Committee, and then from there we'll have like a short amount of time for questions. So I'll just go ahead and get started with reading this. On February 14th, 2015, hundreds of people from across Denver took to the streets to demand justice for countless victims of police terror here in Denver. 4 main cases have become a rallying call for an enraged Denver community. All 4 involved Denver police officers opening fire into cars filled with unarmed occupants. These incidents, starting with the fatal shooting of Brian Ronquillo on July 2nd, have left 2 people dead and 3 people wounded. 2 of those wounded now sit in jail cells facing more jail time than any officer who has killed an unarmed suspect ever will. These shootings have also left countless others scarred emotionally and physically. These scars and wounds may very well never heal, but they surely cannot be washed away with soap and water. Much media attention has focused on a single incident that occurred on February 14th. Red paint being symbolically poured over the Denver police crest that adorned a memorial to fallen officers. This single act has caused more anger and alarm in some quarters than the decades-long unchecked history of rampant police violence and terror within this community. And because of that fact, this single act has illustrated quite clearly why so many across Denver are enraged and willing to take such actions in the first place. We live in dire times where human life has become less meaningful than a stone slab that pretends to honor the value of human life. We have entered a period where Black and brown youth can be stolen from their communities merely for being suspected of driving a car that does not belong to them. The quote stolen car of today has surpassed the planted gun of yesteryear as the new excuse to gun down unarmed youth. That the media has also so viciously gone out of their ways to convict before trial the suspects who allegedly were responsible for the symbolic action involving the red paint shows an even deeper sickness in Denver and across this country. Just as the police play judge, jury, and indeed executioner, the media in this city play the same game, aiding in the police efforts to demonize any and all who may oppose their bloody attacks on our streets. No questions have been asked about the legitimacy of the police accusations. The police are always to be believed, their stories and accusations supported by the media. If the police say someone is guilty, then the media goes out of their way to report the story that way, whether that be of the victims of police terror or those accused of standing up to that same terror. The police officers involved in these situations, however, are always exalted as heroes. It matters not to the media or to those who support these killer police officers whether or not Jeffrey DeMana, a member of the Denver gang unit, has been directly involved in 3 of these 4 shootings of young, unarmed occupants of cars. It matters not that Nick Rogers, the president of the union representing Denver police officers, is barred from coaching youth sports because he was proven to be abusive to youth athletes. These facts are kept out of this reporting of this story. And this culture of protecting the police from the city officials, the attorney's office, and the media continues. And the blood continues to spill in the streets. And everyone just shakes their head and wonders why. To compare a symbolic act that was easily cleaned up to the ravaging of people's bodies is disgusting at best, but complicit in the terror at worst. Behind me, actually next to me, is a picture of the face of Alex Landau, a young man that had nothing to do with any paint on any memorials. But he was beaten like that because of his age and skin color. That brutal act cost the taxpayers of Denver over $700,000. In fact, the law enforcement officers of Denver have cost the taxpayers tens of millions of dollars over the last decade in lawsuits that have proven a deep pattern of excessive force, wrongful death, and torture. Yet no police officer faces charges for these actions. No police officers fear sitting in jail cells for shooting unarmed civilians. But 2 people who stood up to the police now face years in prison, charged with major felonies because of paint. If this single act cannot demonstrate the extent of the problems facing this community, then we cannot be surprised if people feel compelled to act in more bold and creative ways to continue to stand against police terror in this community and communities all over the country. In the wake of this controversial action in which washable paint was symbolically poured on a crest of one of the most violent police departments in the country, Members of police unions across the state have demanded the resignation of Denver Police Chief Robert White and Manager of Safety Stephanie O'Malley for their adherence to a policy of non-confrontation with demonstrators at recent protests against police violence. Now, we agree with the Denver Police Protective Association on one thing. Chief White and Stephanie O'Malley have to go. But that has nothing to do with what happened on February 14th. These two have been at the helm of a police department that has continued to be out of control, with no end in sight to the murder, torture, and daily violence. The fact that the Denver PPA and Nick Rogers would go out of their way to demand a resignation from anyone in the command structure because they were not brutal enough, they were not violent enough, is beyond sick, and demonstrates even further how diseased that body of officers has become. Because we live in a city that has one of the highest per capita rates of death caused by interactions with police officers in the country. And these officers are angry because they weren't allowed to bust some heads and exact their violent fantasies against those who would dare oppose them. If Chief White and Director O'Malley should lose their jobs for any reason, it should be their stewardship of this brutal and violent department. They did not do enough to stem the flow of blood in our streets or jails. But the Denver PPA and Nick Rogers show their bloodlust for what it is. They won't stop until every single citizen in this city is literally beaten into submission, and there is an unwavering and unquestioning support for the police and their bloody violence from every corner of the city. We have a message to the city, to the police department, to Nick Rogers, District Attorney Mitch Morrissey, and every other politician, city official, and police officer with blood on their hands, which would be all of them. We will not stop, we will not be beaten into submission, and we are out of cheeks to turn. Behind us, actually next to us over here, is a sacred memorial, venerated and hallowed much like the Denver Police Memorial. This is where Ryan Ronquillo was killed on July 2nd. We will never forget, and we will never stop fighting for justice, for Ryan, for the Herrera brothers, for Sherrod, for Jesse, or for any of the countless others who came before them or will come after them. Ferguson is Denver. Denver is New York City. New York City is Oakland. Across this country, people are standing up and fighting against injustice. And those movements will only continue to grow and gain traction as long as killer cops continue to wage war on poor and working class people across this country.
So we'll take a couple questions if anyone has any. I know some media outlets were later than others, so if anyone needs a copy of this for any of the reporting they're doing, we can email that to you after this is over. We just need to get your contact information and we can get it over to you as soon as possible. So.
My name is Josie. Josie. Yes.
Other than the exiting of Stephanie O'Malley and Robert White, do you have any other convenience?
In a system that made sense for people all across this city and across this community, we wouldn't have to talk about indicting or jailing killer cops. Unfortunately, right now in the society that we live in, there aren't very many other ways that we can deal with justice against police officers. District Attorney Mitch Morrissey has not indicted a single killer cop for any of the incidents in question, let alone an incident of excessive force or police violence that we are aware of, despite what their office might claim. And the reality is at this point that if cops can go out into the communities and can kill with complete immunity, then there is nothing to stop them from continuing that cycle. As Jeffrey DeMano proves quite clearly, as he has now killed one individual and wounded up to 3 others in his bloody rampage throughout the city in the last 7 months alone. What's up? My name's Dave. Strano, S-T-R-A-N-O. Yes. We can end this now. No one else has any questions. I just think this should spell it out, right? Let's be real here. We have red paint on a memorial that was washed away within hours. And we have the real blood of not just Alex Landau, but countless others who've been beaten, killed, shot, tortured within the jails here, and on the receiving end of excessive force and brutality every day in this city. We cannot compare the two. And that the police union will have rallies because of this, and that the city will have rallies because of this, and the city will have outrage over this, but not this, illustrates exactly why we're here and why we're in the streets to begin with.
Over your history of working at this issue, can you talk about the families?
Sure. The Ronquillos, I don't know if April actually got here yet or not, have been very clear that they want to see the 4 officers who killed their son actually just several, dozen yards that way on July 2nd. They want to see indictments. They want to see anything that'll resemble justice. We have 4 officers who opened fire on an unarmed occupant of a vehicle, and this has happened repeatedly just in the last 7 months alone. They want justice in that way. They want to know that police officers will no longer be able to shoot their kids without some form of punishment. That doesn't necessarily go far enough. It doesn't deal with the systemic issues that we're talking about. But for right now, it's the bare bones. It's the bare minimum that needs to be done. Jeffrey DeMana has been involved in 3 incidents in 7 months of shooting unarmed occupants of cars. And he's still on the streets, still an active part of the gang, and his job hasn't even been threatened in any way. The other thing that we know for certain is that the Denver Police Department has released, or at least attempted to release, their preliminary findings in the death of Ryan Ronquillo. But we do know it was sent back to the city because the Independent Monitor had a ton of questions and issues and concerns with that investigation. We don't know what the investigation found. We don't know what the outcome is going to be internally. This, again, is just an administrative investigation at the police department level by Chief White and his officials and the people that are in power there. We don't know. But we do know that in the 7 months since Ryan was killed, we've had no actual interaction with anyone from the city besides folks that we have sought out and that we've demanded to have time with, and that Ryan is gone, but that there's no level of any justice for him or anything coming out of the city at all. And that right now, just last month, we lost Jesse Hernandez in a very, very shockingly similar situation. A youth of color driving what was alleged to be a stolen car, who was accused of trying to run over a police officer, killed, shot multiple times. And there's all sorts of witness testimony that says different things, but that's not what matters in this case. We do know that in 4 incidents, the occupants of 4 vehicles, 5 people, have been shot, although they were unarmed, and the car was used as an excuse to shoot them. Most other cities across this country right now, can we be clear about that? Most other cities across this country do not allow police officers to shoot at moving vehicles for any reason unless the occupants are deemed armed and shooting at the officers in question. New York City, LA, these places do not allow officers to shoot at moving vehicles. They have brutal police departments. That's not what I'm debating here. I'm not trying to hold these up as some sort of place to emulate for our police departments. But if those regimes in LA, one of the most brutal police departments in the country, has a policy that doesn't allow people to shoot unarmed occupants of cars, why doesn't Denver? New York City has had that policy since the 1970s. We're talking 40 years of that policy, and we're still shooting at black and brown youth who are unarmed sitting in cars. So there's a lot of things that need to change, whether that's policy, whether that's police officers actually being indicted for the crimes that they commit against this community every day, or whether that's actually just the people in this community mobilizing and demanding that justice in the streets, which is really where we're going to end up getting it. We've been shown that time and time again. There's no justice coming out of the courts. There's no justice coming out of the DA's office. There's no justice at City Hall, because all they're going to do is pass this bare bones minimal legislation that gives the Independent Monitor just a little bit more power to do nothing. But the reality is our community is what has to mobilize to stop these killer cops. And you're seeing that in communities from 5 Points to Park Hill, where people are starting to patrol their own communities. And that's what's happening right now. And unfortunately, that's probably what's going to have to continue to happen. That will be the only thing that will stop this. One act of goodwill, actually, if we could still get this this on there. One act of goodwill from the district attorney's office to prove that they take any of this seriously at all would be to immediately drop the charges against Robert Herrera and Matthew Goldberg, because they face major felony charges, like class 4 felony criminal mischief, and face prison time for this incident, whereas no officer ever has faced any prison time for this. So one step of goodwill would be to drop the charges immediately and to show that at least at that point we can agree that symbolic actions like this do not deserve prison time, and that this might be more of what we need to look at as far as the district attorney's office. Because we know this is much more serious, what Alex and other people have faced in this community. Not some paint on a piece of stone that was washed away.
Yes.
So that would be the immediate demand. Let's drop those charges and let's make it shown to the people of Denver that the district attorney is serious about cleaning up this police department in any way.
I just got one thing to say. My name is Derek Doyle, Vice President at Crucial Conduct. We're a nonprofit organization out here to solve issues like this. I mean, we're the bridge that's in between our community and the police officers. We want to make sure no police officers end up like this, no other civilians in the community end up like this. You know, right now we have a petition going out to a few people that are in jail right now righteously or unrighteously for doing incidents like this, or even having some type of retaliation towards the police. If you please go to our page on Facebook, it's Crucial Conduct. Right now our page is not open for our website, but it will be at the end of the month. Please give your donations. Please give your support for all of these people that are going through it. And this could be you or your child. And we don't want that to happen to anybody's kids. There's America. We shouldn't have to go through this. We have a Constitution. We have a Bill of Rights. There's steps in the community that we can take every day to make a bridge in the gap so this doesn't have to happen ever again. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
I'd like to speak. I am a mother of 4 boys. The fact that my children are black young men got me in fear of what can happen to them in the future. My oldest will be 15. I have a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old boy. I don't want to have my kids have fear of the police. They should actually be able to go to them for help and not have fear of asking for help from the police. It's unfair. And it's just, I can't stand or even express the words that can actually tell you how I feel about this. There's kids that are getting shot in Park Hill that I know of. A little girl got shot driving just for no apparent reason by the police and said that, she had some type of weapon out the window, and all the witnesses actually said she didn't, but she still got shot for no apparent reason. So I'm against all of it completely, regardless of what type of authority you feel you have. You have no right to do what you're doing to people's children, nor to people at all. It's wrong and needs to change now.
Could you take a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Have you coached your children with protective measures on the streets?
I've actually and I had to, and I actually had to let them know that, at this point the police are not no one you actually can depend on. And that's actually sad. Because what if something happens to my 14-year-old where he's walking down the street, gets jumped, and he needs to call the police for help, turn around, they don't do nothing for him. They just leave him hanging. I have taught my children how to handle things as far as situations that, can exceed to whatever measures in life. But, I'm grateful my kids are not out on the streets. I'm grateful they're not, no children that are acting out to where they would have to worry about this. But the fact that they're just black is the issue. So I let them know that you have your back, pay attention, you can't trust LANA.
J. Homer. I'm from the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation from so-called South Dakota. And I've been following this on Facebook. It hurt my feelings to hear about people who are unarmed, had no kind of weapons on them, who are being murdered. From people like this to people of brown color. I came down here yesterday from the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation after we had one of our own events. And I was happy to come down to help support, but I was also scared because I'm brown. And I was scared of the police that I might get gunned down just for walking down these streets to come help and help protest during some of these events. So, but coming down here, my heart is heavy with grief, depression. Sometimes I feel like I want to cry, but I have to hold my head up high because I'm part of a warrior society back in the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, and we are taught to help stand and fight against these things, especially against police brutality. Thank you.
Again, if you have a business card or you need a copy of the statement that we read, just let us know.